We back in the lab, we making some noise, so go turn your decibels up. Black skin, white coat, oh no, who was nice as us? Made Jimison, really told us no limit, so we about to take us up. Went from mixing in the kitchen to the lab, and now I can make this up. Whoa! Be shy, be scientist, be shy, be scientist. We shining a light on the people of color to show them how fly it is. Be shy, be scientist, be shy, be scientist. We back in the lab with white coats on our back, trying to show what time it is. Hey.
And welcome back to the B-Science podcast, a podcast by the Black Science Coalition Institute, or B-SCI. When you hear this noise, that is our in-podcast citation. And then if you hear that noise, you can go and look on our website to see all of our citations ever at b.sci.org/B-Scientist. I am geoarchaeologist Jordan Chapman. As always, we have the dope chemist herself,
Jana Carpenter.
And yeah, I mean, we're still grad students. We're still living life.
Still grad students, still grad schooling, all of that good stuff.
How are you doing?
I'm okay. I am okay. Made it through another week, which is always a huge milestone.
Yeah, clap
for
it
me.
up, clap it up.
Yep. How are you doing?
Tip off the hat. Same.
Yeah.
Just living.
It is October, the autumnal season of the year.
What'd you say?
Autumnal. I love saying that word.
Autumnal.
It's just a weird way to say autumn.
Okay. Oh, autumnal. Really?
I might not even be using that word correctly, but I said it. It's
I
the
mean,
word of the
you
day.
get a lot to me. You sounded like a genius when you said it. I already knew you were a genius, but you really sounded like a genius when you just said it.
I think I've probably heard it on NPR or something like that, and I was like,
okay,
yep, that's my word now.
Right.
Yep.
Dope.
But yeah, the autumnal equinox was on Wednesday, September 22nd. So there's something. That's probably why that came up.
Okay.
But yeah, and other news. I guess today will just be a little bit of an outline of some things going on. Generally just science news, and in particular, there's now 3-dimensional electronic microflyers, which is interesting because these are tiny microchips that mimic seeds or seedlings that can fly in the air. And so these microchips are going to be used to kind of surveil areas for pollution and the spread of airborne disease. Or at least that's what we're hoping, right? Because this kind of reminds me of those Black Mirror episodes. These small microchips are just kind of flying in the air. They're smaller than the size of the tip of a pencil. And yeah, I don't know. There's something about it that feels slightly scary just because I feel like it can definitely be used for bad very quickly. But yeah, so the whole idea is that these scientists at Northwestern University, led by John A. Rogers, developed this design for this highly rotational device. So it's got 3 sides, and it's kind of like a pop-up propeller in a way. And they did say that they designed this from kind of like children's books, how they pop up. And they use this design to kind of help the dispersion of this microchip through the air, just like a seed would, just like maple trees that have propeller seeds. This is known as the Samara fruit that they used for their design. So yeah, you've got these tiny, tiny little microchips just flying in the air, totally chill. Just, surveying areas. Nothing could possibly go wrong, right?
Right. So, we did a Black Mirror episode some time ago, and this reminds me of I forget the name of the episode. I think it's called "Hated in the Nation." It's about how this billionaire scientist basically created mechanical bees. And because like someone like used like whatever Twitter thing they were using in the universe of Black Mirror, they like hacked the bees, and like if you used the hashtag enough, the bees could go around and just like kill people basically. This isn't the same thing, but it's The
It's
idea is, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting idea and cool that we are reaching these kind of levels of scientific discovery where we can literally send
Hmm.
out seedlings to monitor how our ecosystem is functioning. But at the same time, it is kind of a little scary because it is just one step away from that exact episode. Because I mean, so this design doesn't actually have motors or any kind of
Okay.
battery use, but it could easily be transferred to that, right? These are
Hmm.
essentially just microchips that are collecting data. So there's no reason why they couldn't just make battery operated little drones, right? So
Yeah, I mean, that's that's wild. It's one of those questions where it's like, do we as scientists push the big red button? And it always seems like, you know, we got to ask that question because, like, on the one hand, we do need that. We need something because of human activity. We don't have, we're losing our pollinators. We're losing bees and things like that because we don't know how to treat the environment. So, and this is a solution to that, but it's like we also might do something stupid. So yeah.
yeah, and so and it's kind of while you can locate these microchips pretty easily, it's kind of hard to
Hmm.
say whether or not you can collect all of them at the end of an experiment, right? If you do a
Hmm.
widespread survey, to get the right sample size, you might need 100 of these tiny little microchips. And so,
Right.
really, what is the likelihood of you getting all 100 of them back?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then what happens to the area that you're looking at once it's just gone? What if someone picks it up? What if it falls in someone's hair? It's just kind of weird. And
Uh
obviously, I
huh.
don't see them just dispersing these in highly populated areas. But at the same time, if they are effective in the same way that these Samara fruit seedlings propel, then there's really no telling how far they can really reach as far as
Hmm.
distance. So, really
Right.
interesting.
That is
We'll see.
interesting. Yeah. Yeah. In other news, this upcoming week, so today is October 3rd. This upcoming week, they will be announcing the Nobel Prize winners for 6 different categories. They are physiology or medicine, that's one, physics, chemistry, economic science, literature, and piecework. Over the next week, they'll be announcing that slowly. And while there has never been a Nobel Prize winner for medicine or physiology who is black, there is at least one person who was nominated from the article I've seen who is black. Her name is Dr. Marilyn Hughes Gatson, if I'm saying that right. And her research focused on sickle cell. So yeah, that's something to look out for. I'm excited to see that because it is the crown jewel of science, right? To one day get a Nobel Peace Prize. Most people won't even ever be nominated. So just to be nominated it's not like when you watch like the award shows and they're like, yeah, well, but like, literally to be nominated for a Nobel Prize of any kind is legitimately like an accomplishment and one to be proud of, no matter if you win it or not. So, but if you win it, obviously, it's just crazy. But yeah, so that's happening this week. Some other like famous Nobel Prize winners for at least for peace include Barack Obama and Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King. So that just tells you like the category of like accomplishment that go that is to win a Nobel Prize. The ceremony is going to be in Oslo, which I don't exactly remember which country that is in. Norway. Oslo is in
Norway.
Norway.
Okay. Yeah, my
Um,
next guess was going to be
and
Sweden or something.
yeah, that's a good guess because the committee that decides who win Nobel prizes is like a committee that's made up of people in Sweden and Norway. So that's something to look out for.
Always, these areas of high recognition could always use more people of color, um,
Hmm.
in my opinion. And, there's,
Yeah.
I mean, even besides that fact, there's always so much controversy that goes into who gets nominated for these positions, I feel like, just because
Hmm.
science is pretty competitive. Um,
Yeah.
you come up with something in hopes that no one else has come up with this original thought before. So really, it's kind of like a race in a way.
Hmm.
Are you coming up with something interesting that no one else has thought of? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe someone has thought of this and they haven't gotten things published yet. Like it's sometimes it's just sometimes it comes down to who you know, right? So if you get published, is it because you know those people who are editors on a certain journal? You know,
Hmm.
do you have recognition? Do you have that? What is that status on ResearchGate? Do you have impact factor? So
Right.
but yeah, I think it's definitely a huge accomplishment to even be recognized in those spaces.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm definitely interested to see who comes out on top.
Right. It's funny as you were saying that and talk about like the competitive for science. I started thinking about the fact that there, we all know Charles Darwin for the origins of the species, but there's also Alfred Russel Wallace who also came up with the idea of natural selection, and I think this story is that like he sent Darwin a question or something like that. He sent like a letter to Darwin because it's like the 1800s, and he sent it to somebody. It's either he sent it to Darwin or he sent it to someone that Darwin knew. It's like, does this sound right, basically? And then Darwin got word of it and was like, oh, I actually already kind of have this idea, so let me just publish right now before he has a chance. So you're right. Like one of the most famous advancements in science happened in a relatively the same type of way you described it. So it's just crazy.
Yeah, it really sucks sometimes if you think about it, because sometimes your worth comes down to how many publications you have, and
Hmm.
um, yeah, it's just like it's crazy. You could be on the brink of a huge discovery, and if you don't get it published, then really doesn't matter. Which
Yeah.
is, it
Hmm.
brings on a whole other slew of moral questions to ask.
Hmm.
Like what is your
Right.
worth as a scientist? Which really
Yeah. I
sucks.
mean, it does because on the one hand, like I think like another question that comes up sometimes is like, is knowledge worth it just because of itself, right? So if you were to discover something that's like very crucial to humanity, and you were like, oh well, that's just cool, and like I'm just not going to publish on it, that seems wrong. That seems like morally wrong. But on the other hand, if you are going to publish it and someone else does, and someone else also made the same discovery, then you would hope that there should be no competition. It should be collaborative and like, oh well, we both figured it out. Let's just publish together, which
Right.
can happen,
Yeah, because
but
it's like
it's not always the
rarely,
case.
rarely do you find something that's like a complete mirror of someone else's perspective. Maybe you have a different
Hmm.
perspective or a different angle to look at the same thing. And I feel like that should be honored just as much, as long as it's not something that's like, oh yeah, I heard someone talking about this at a conference and now I'm going to publish on it because I'm vindictive,
Right.
which does also
Yeah. Yeah.
happen. But
It does. Yeah. Hmm.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
just, it's really cutthroat. And I wish there was just more collaboration with.
Which I mean, yeah, we love to say things like that, especially like right now you're writing grants and stuff, and I have in the past for at least for like personal grants for like funding and things like that, and yeah, there's always the question of like, is this collaborative? Is this blah blah blah? Blah? And it's just like, and I know at least in anthropology, there's always like, oh well, we need to be interdisciplinary, and I think what they're saying is that we like to work with others, but that's all again, like you were just saying, it's not always the case.
Yeah, I just went to a seminar where fourth and fifth year students gave flash talks on their research. And a lot of them,
Hmm.
surprisingly, had to be really brief about what they were researching because a lot of them were hoping to write patents on their research and working with
Oh,
big
okay.
name companies. And so it's like, they would finish their flash talk and then someone would say, but what actually what's the mechanism of action for your research or something like that? And they would say, well, I can't really speak on that because I'm waiting for patents and paperwork to go through. And it's like, wow, even in grad school, you're working so hard to get recognition for yourself, but there's so many paywalls against things, and like protecting your intellectual merit or whatever. So it's just like,
Right.
it's so wild to
Yeah.
me. It's still hard for me to wrap my head around, but like just seeing it happen in front of me is just, it's crazy.
Hmm.
Science is its own political arena, which we should get
It
into at
definitely
some
is.
point for sure. But yeah, I guess moving on from that, because I could talk about that for
We
days
can
and
definitely about
days.
that all day.
But moving on to the next item of interest, which is kind of really sad to talk about, kind of, is the giant sequoias that are currently on the decline. They are becoming pretty endangered, unfortunately. Um, a recent survey at the Sequoia National Forest in the remote regions of Sierra Nevada um, kind of looked at there being a huge devastation caused by rampant wildfires, as we all know, and especially last year there was the Castle Fire. So basically, these giant sequoias that I'm sure you've all seen pictures of, or even if you've seen it in person, which is awesome, are huge, huge trees with a diameter at the base of the trunk that can be up to like, I don't know, like 40 feet, which is insane to think about. I can't even,
That's wild.
yeah,
Goddamn.
I can't really wrap my head around how big that is. But these huge sequoia trees can live to over 3,000 years old, which is
Hmm.
crazy. But last year, during the onset of these really huge wildfires, over 10,000 of them were burned to the point of actually killing the tree. And so, what's interesting about this is that if we look back on the history of these giant sequoias, of course, you got to bring up colonization, right? So before this area was colonized, of course, indigenous tribes were taken care of and were the caretakers of these giant sequoias, and they would have prescribed burns, which was a cultural
Hmm.
practice to help kind of cultivate the area and prime it for certain wild game that would frequent the area. And this would actually be really good for the trees because the only way to release the seed from the cone that drops from the tree is to heat it to a certain degree. And that actually releases the seeds from the cone
Hmm.
and helps it to grow. And so these prescribed burns kind of stopped dramatically after the brutal colonization of indigenous people from this area. um, and then, there was a lot of fire suppression that happened after that. And so, of course, now that we're in the year 2021, hundreds of years
Hmm.
after people who were pretty much traditionally primed to help these regions, we have these rampant man made wildfires, which you would think to yourself, well, a fire is a fire, right? Why aren't they surviving? Well, these are different types of fires now, right? So we've been in huge droughts for years now in these areas, and it kind of hasn't let up. And I don't know that it will let up anytime soon because we see with the drastic changes from climate change that these areas are being affected at really exponential rates. And so a lot of these droughts are causing these fires to be a lot hotter and
Right.
more uncontrollable than they were in the past. And so we're finding now that um, you'll see seedlings that have been burned to the point of killing off the seeds inside, um, and the fires reaching up to the tops of these huge sequoia trees, killing them off completely. And so, where once you would see hundreds or thousands of small sequoias growing each year after a prescribed burn, we're now
Hmm.
only seeing dozens. And with the rapidness of these wildfires each year, we're seeing less and less of these smaller sequoias actually surviving to the next year. So It's really concerning because these are natural wonders of our world that we're just casually killing off one by one and
Mhm.
don't really know how to feel about it. Because I just, this is a problem that we could solve with the help of experts and national
Mhm.
forest officers
And
who know,
indigenous people.
and indigenous people. And it's like,
Mhm.
man, really messed up on that part.
Yeah.
US kind of
Yeah,
messed
I'm
up.
thinking about it. Yeah, I'm like sitting here thinking about it. I'm like, I think I saw like a picture of like them like taking like something like aluminum foil and wrapping it around one of the sequoias, that I believe is either the tallest or the oldest. I don't remember which one it is, but it's like if you've ever seen a picture of a giant sequoia, you probably saw a picture of that one. And just to think that, I think earlier this year, or maybe I think I mean, there's been several different wildfires, but I think we also talked about another one on the podcast sometime in the last couple months. So that just tells you again that this stuff is ongoing and current.
Yeah, the
So,
droughts have not let up, unfortunately, in these areas of California and
mhm,
all along the West Coast. So yeah, and speaking of they do refer to those the largest and oldest sequoias as the Sequoia monarch, or they're a group of monarchs. And yeah, so that foil wrapping is really a last resort to combating the destruction of these giant sequoias. But really, it's like there's only so much you can do because these wildfires are really out of control. Really,
mhm,
it's hard to manage them, and I'm sure you've seen videos of how quickly they can run through an area.
yeah.
So yeah, tough stuff.
Stuff. Um, in other news and climate change almost is so uh there was a new study that was recently published in Science magazine, but also reported in NPR, of a research group led by Matthew Bennett of Bournemouth University in England, which examined a set of human footprints preserved on ancient lakeshore in New Mexico's White Sands National Park. These footprints were made 21,000 to 23,000 years ago, and um, this would place the first human habitation in North America during the last glacial maximum at least 5,000 years earlier than we previously believed, which is crazy because that's a long amount of time. I mean, and so part of how they figured that out was do radiocarbon dating, which I mean, me and Jenna have both done. Jenna has done it a lot, so that's just
Just a couple,
that's
just
just a
a
couple
few
times.
thousand samples.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's something that's going on. And I think it's real interesting because the last glacial maximum is like when we see a lot of like just like a lot of climate change. For the people who don't know what the last glacial maximum is, sometimes you might hear it referred to as the LGM. But basically, it was the last time glaciers were as far south as I believe, like where today is like Wisconsin-ish. And if I'm not wrong, I think that's also part of how um, the Great Lakes were formed too. So that just tells you how big of an event it was. And we're talking like huge glaciers. We're talking about like mile high glaciers, just that far south. Um, so and their impact, if you think about just how big that is and across like a huge swath of land. We're talking about again as far south as Wisconsin, but across like that part of the country from you know Oregon to like I think there are some places in like the northern parts of New York that also have glacial features from back then. So that just tells you how wide and like how widespread the glaciers were. So I just think it's real fascinating to think about those things because it kind of intersects with a lot of like my fields in both archaeology, because this is talking about footprints from the first humans set in North America, but it's also geology, which I also kind of do, and also geography, which is like my minor from Penn State. So it just kind of reaches and touches all of those places to me. So I think it's just really cool.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too because the thing I always find cool about these kinds of things, like finding out, oh yeah, humans have been here for like a really long time. I feel like often, sometimes scientists will like belittle the fact that like humans are kind of really smart if you think about it. Because I mean, I know it's like, oh, they're so
Right.
primitive. They used sticks and stones and they used all of these things and they didn't really know what they were doing. It's like, well, we kind of also make the same mistakes time and time again as humans.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think we should give them a little bit more credit. Like they
For
cut
making
themselves
it that far,
alive.
yeah.
Yeah, like they cut themselves alive 21,000 years ago, but potentially that's kind of incredible. I
Yeah,
don't know.
for sure. And like the fact also pushed back by like 5,000 years is also crazy because oh, like for a while it was just like oh yeah, like it's right here, and now it's like you might have been wrong about it. It's earlier, so that's just crazy to think about sometimes too.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested to see how they will um, decipher like their how they responded to their environment, how they adapted to their environment and lived and communicated with each other. Because
Hmm.
now it's like, now you got to find new terminology to come up with to say, oh, well, it's just some blanket theory to say, oh, well, this is how they communicated and blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
I don't know. I just think it's interesting.
No, that's fair. I'm also thinking about like some of like what else is going on around that time. Like you still have like a pretty sizable population of like woolly mammoths and like large animals like that walking around too. So yeah, that's just dope as hell.
Yeah, that's pretty
I just
crazy.
like I think I yeah just I don't remember like the entire like ecosystem of what's going on besides the woolly mammoth. I think there's like also like pretty large like sloths maybe
Hmm.
something like that. I know there's like a like large saber tooth. It's just tigers around. There's just crazy stuff like that walking around. And you're like, I could not. And no, you probably could not. It's just that's wild to think about sometimes.
Honestly, I just think about like people who live in Florida and are often just like, you know, just a casual alligator just on their front lawn or something like that. I feel like it's like
Yeah.
probably something like that where they're like, oh dang it, the tiger's on my front lawn again. Like, oh, the woolly mammoth just
Hmm.
like crushed my crops. Thanks a lot. Like, I just can't imagine it. But
No, that's crazy. You said something about alligators, and there's a TikTok video going around of like a dude like taking like a trash can in Florida and then like putting an alligator in it. So apparently,
that's just
what
wild.
I found out about this dude is that he's from Philly and that he also used to drive SEPTA. And in my head, I'm like, that makes sense. It just makes sense.
That's crazy. Because I did see that video and I was just like, first of all, how are you? You're approaching the Alec, and you're just
Hmm.
cool,
He's
calm,
just doing
cool,
it.
collected. Did it without
Hmm.
any issues at all. I was just like, this takes a certain breed of person. And now that I know that they're from Philly, I'm just like, well, there it is.
Yeah, you gotta be careful if someone moves from Philly to Florida, you just gotta take into account both of those things. You can't you there's a certain type of energy that person is giving off. You gotta be careful.
They're just built different, right?
They build different.
That's hilarious.
It's crazy.
Yeah, highly recommend seeing that video because, like, I mean, it was just expertly done. Truly, I would have
It-
dropped it. I would have
honestly,
like slipped. My hands would have been sweating and dropped the trash can, and that would have been it for me. You know, that was not a small
honestly, the
alligator.
fact that it was not. Listen, if if I ever like, I just if there's ever a day where like a snake or something like gets into my house, then either one or two things. It's going to be fight or flight. Like just start there. It's going to be fight or flight. But if I'm fighting, I just gotta it's gotta go. It just can't walk this earth again at that point. I just like, so even if it's an alligator, I'm like, I don't know how you got in here, but you can't leave. So I even give props to him for just keeping it alive at that point. Like, that's just mad props to that dude. I wonder what part of Philly he's from, to be honest. That's kind of what I want to know now. I'm just like, man, that's crazy. But we don't really have too many surges. We've been busy,
Just a
studying for
little.
comps. Jenna's got she's writing like at least 2 grants right now.
Yeah, there's one due
So, and then
tomorrow.
still working. Mm-hmm.
It's just been a lot of running around with like a chicken with my head cut off.
Yeah.
But I still enjoy this. I still enjoy learning new things. The fight, I guess what I'm saying is I still have the fight within me, but it is tough, and we're doing our best.
Mm-hmm. We might not have too many guests for the next, month or two, probably, because we're still, just handling stuff basically. And then we've also touched about deep dives and stuff too, which I'm really excited to do when we finally do it, to be honest. But it's just, it takes a lot to do it, because it's like research on top of research, which is why, like, I know at the beginning of the podcast, that's kind of what we thought we were going to do, was we thought we were going to, like, research. Like, that's kind of how that Black Mirror episode we were talking about earlier happened. We were like, oh, let's watch the episode, let's break it down. And, what we found out really early on is that it took a lot of work.
Indeed.
But we do want to get back to doing stuff like that. It just we got to be in the right headspace for it. I guess it's the right way to talk about that, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, we've floated around a few ideas, and if you have anything specific that you'd like us to do a deep dive into, I think we'd be more than willing to look into it, because it is a lot of fun to do. But yeah, just like Jordan is saying, we do need to be in the right headspace, and with so many things going on, it's a little difficult to do right now, but we definitely have a few ideas that we would like to execute when we can. So thank you for bearing with us. We appreciate you.
Yeah, just before we go, also, we did, for similar reasons, we pushed back the date that we'll probably publish the magazine, because again, it's just work. It's just, we were kind of slow to doing things. We had to get the editing stuff together so we could make sure that all the articles would be presented in the way we wanted them to, and then, with the scientific rigor that, the B-SCI board members could do. But again, we all have lives that, revolve around other things. So we had to push that back. We're trying to do it early next year, like 2022, within the first couple months. So it's still planned. It's just pushed back.
Yeah, and I mean, we are working towards it really hard. We just had our really successful workshop with distillations. That was really awesome. I learned a lot.
Yes.
And I think everyone who was in attendance was able to gain something from it. So yeah, we're really hoping to make something really special. So please be on the lookout for that, and be thinking about things that you want to submit. And we'll get out more information about that as the time nears. So
also, later in October, we'll be doing another distillations workshop. This one we just did was about narrative nonfiction, and the next one will be more about podcasting and audio storytelling. So that's one that definitely, is relevant to us as podcasters. And if you ever wonder, how do I start a podcast? You might want to check that one out.
Definitely.
We'll have the we did a registration link for that one, so we'll probably do the same thing. In fact, I think it's already created, because one of our partners, Science for Georgia, has a monthly newsletter, and they were asking if we had anything coming up. So I think I just made one real fast so they could have one. So it's out there. We'll publish it soon enough. So look out for that.
Well, as we wrap up this week, I just want to say thank you again. And as always, we hope you will be scientists.
See you guys. B-Scientist is a podcast by the Black Science Coalition and Institute, or B-SCI, a 501c3 nonprofit. B-Scientist is hosted by both Jana Carpenter, chemist and B-SCI's Research and Development Officer, and Jordan Chapman, geoarchaeologist and B-SCI's president. Music is produced by Delaralo, and lyrics are by Jana. Special thanks to Michael, Mike, Castor, Marshall, and the Plaza Abbey Studios. If you'd like to donate to B-SCI, visit our official website, bsci.org. That's b-sci.org. Your donation supports the B-Scientist and B-SCI's other projects. We couldn't do it without you. So, please tune in next time, and always, be scientists.